Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. Today I will be your host, Adam Boyne. You can refer to me as he, him. And with me today is my co-host, Melissa Chaplin. How are you doing, Melissa?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. I'm Melissa. I am an indie games marketer, and my pronouns are she, her.
Wonderful. And welcome to the Game Dev London podcast. It's good to have you here to chat about all things marketing. So for those of you out there who are sort of wondering, just kicked off a game, or I want to know what to do. This episode is going to be about how to start marketing your indie game. We want to sort of introduce some ideas, set you up with the ideas that you can get out there, build whatever following you need to, so that when you release your game or go to some kind of publisher or whatever it might be, that they go, oh yeah, I've heard of that one, and don't go, who? Because that's less helpful. So I'm going to kick us off really with, because this is a big topic. Let's dive straight into it. The all important question: if you're an indie developer, you've just built your demo, you got something looking good, but you don't have any following, you're brand new to the scene. Where do you start?
Ooh, I mean, so first of all, if you are ahead of that, if you haven't got a demo yet and stuff, please, you can start earlier than that. You don't need to be at that level to start. What I would really recommend to everyone getting started who is thinking about building a following and things like that would be having a dedicated Twitter account that you use to get stuck into the kind of community of indie developers. Now, I say that rather than promote your game, because in all likelihood, your first 1,000 followers are going to be other indie game developers. There's a really wonderful supportive community on Twitter of kind of different indie developers and also kind of, enthusiasts, journalists, people like myself who work kind of adjacent to indie development in the scene, who are really just kind of looking to uplift, advise, engage with, indie games. So that, I think, is the attitude to approach it with. While you're kind of developing, while you're working on stuff, don't look at it as like, this is an opportunity to sell the game that I haven't made yet. Look at it as more of an opportunity to get kind feedback and develop kind of relationships within the industry. Chris Zukowski, who does the How to Market a Game newsletter, which if you are not subscribed, I fully recommend subscribing to, is he said that you should think of Twitter as like a 24/7 games industry conference. Because that is where a lot of the industry in terms of social media house themselves. Before I worked in games, I worked in fashion. And, we very much at the time, fashion was focused on Instagram and it was all about Instagram. You might talk to someone's personal assistant, or, a designer's personal assistant through Instagram DMs. And, how you presented yourself on Instagram was really central. Twitter is that for games. Participate in the stuff that's going on in terms of hashtags and specific moments. So things like pitch your game, screenshot Saturday, indie dev hour, which happens on a Wednesday in the evening. Really get stuck in and give back as much as you take. Get involved and respond to other indie developers, talk to them, look for people who are kind of in a similar sort of niche to you. There is very much an attitude of the tide rises and brings all ships with it. So, people will cross-promote games. People will, share other developers' work. If you're making an adventure game, then Adventure Game Friday is fantastic for that. You see all of these, different people making kind of point and click style games, like being like, hey, if you like my game, you should check out this one. And I love that. So that would be kind of step one for me. The caveat I will set to that is don't give away too much. And I don't mean don't share anything about the game and stuff like that. But as an indie developer, you only get a couple of moments that are PR worthy. If you're Nintendo, then you can sneeze and that's news. That's if you're making Breath of the Wild 2, even the absence of news is news. If you're an indie developer, you don't have that luxury. You can't. Luxury is a double-edged sword, of course, if you've got that much attention on you. But if you're an indie developer, you get a few moments where you can really go public with your game and maybe attract the attention of press, influencers, things like that. One of them is the formal announcement of the game, of this game is coming to this platform. Here's what the game is all about. That doesn't mean you can't share anything about your game before that, but you shouldn't do anything like, we are coming out on this date on this platform officially. Like, avoid doing that. Ideally, what you want to do is do that properly with a really polished press release. When you've got everything together, like a demo, for example, that would be really great. Demo is a really strong thing to have at that point.
It is interesting because I've had a couple of people who've approached me who have already released games and then gone, okay, how do I market it now? And there's definitely a sense of the ship having sailed. It's like it is much harder to sort of bring people in once the game's out there because you've missed those kind of press points.
Yeah, it's the worst. I sometimes get people approaching me. I work for an agency called Game If You Are, and we help indie devs of all sizes and budgets, but sometimes people approach me and they're like, oh, my game came out a month ago and it didn't go well. What can you do? And it's kind of like, I mean, you can't unring that bell, which is really unfortunate. But there's not really much you can do at that point. So yeah, be careful. Don't just throw the game out there with no marketing and think you can like kind of retcon your marketing.
Absolutely. Although it's interesting to you say about doing it as early as possible as well. Because obviously, from my perspective, there's an aspect of wanting to have something more solid and concrete out there. And certainly, from my perspective, I've tried to move away from that a little bit with the things I'm working on at the minute, and more towards having something worth seeing being the more important thing. Something that when you show people, they go, "Oh, this looks great." And I think that keys into the sort of thing you were saying about you've only got a few bits that are going to be those kind. There's a few moments and a few parts of your game that are going to be key, almost like a film, right? You don't want to spoil the ending in your trailer because then no one goes to see it.
Yeah, you definitely don't.
Absolutely. An interesting one, sort of building off that, especially because you talked a bit about Twitter there. So Twitter is where I kind of started the games industry as a whole, especially Indie Dev Hour, and just sort of using that as a way to sort of figure out who's who and what's going on and building a following around that. When you have especially when you're an indie developer, you have your own personal account that sort of exists kind of you'll post whatever about whatever, football and games and everything. A lot of developers will then tend to create a separate brand new account for their game. Is that a smart idea, or is it actually more dangerous because it's got no following? How do you sort of see
that? Yeah, I think people should have a dedicated account that is not their personal account where they tweet about kind of football or whatever. So you get people who have a big presence as a kind of auteur developer, your Sam Barlows of the world. That's, that is something legitimate that you can do. It is rare that people are able to pull that off. And you do have to be prepared to dedicate your personal account to, I am an indie dev and this is all my indie dev work.
Right, okay.
And you'd have to know that you were kind of in the kind of sphere of producing that sort of auteurish game, something that's kind of a bit art house. The developer of Manifold Garden, similar sort of presence. William, I don't know how you pronounce his surname. It's like Chir, CH. That's something that you can do. It's not easy to do that.
Right, yeah.
And I think that broadly speaking, you want a promotional account. Now, you have to think a bit about your long-term strategy in terms of, do you need a game account, as in, say my game is called Jump Boy. Do I have a Jump Boy account, or do I have a MRC Studios account? If you plan to release a bunch of quite unrelated games, if you're planning to release stuff that isn't connected to each other, not part of the same franchise, then maybe you want a studio account. If you are just planning to stick with Jump Boy as your thing, then you could have a dedicated Jump Boy account. But I think people should try to be thoughtful about what they apply. You often get people who are just like, oh yeah, I'll just repurpose my Twitter account because it's got followers, but actually those followers aren't necessarily going to be relevant followers for your game. And you're better off, not getting involved in that sort of sunk cost fallacy and actually just starting your official game account, You can direct people on your personal account to go and follow it. The ones who are interested will. But you probably want a bit more of a professional presence, particularly, if you're hoping to build a community of gamers. You'd much rather that they were interacting with the game than you as an individual, really. They might be interested in you as an individual, but if they're looking to like troubleshoot, report a bug or something like that, maybe you want to get a community manager in at some point down the line. You don't want to hand over your personal Twitter account to your community manager. That's weird and unprofessional. So I think having that boundary is a really good shout. And yeah, get the handle soon. Like go and if you've got a handle you want on Twitter, go and claim it. Even if the account's going to sit for a bit before you can do anything with it, at least go and get the app that you want.
Yeah, and same with the URL and the email address and all that kind of thing, because
all the things.
Surprised how many have gone to someone's 6-year-old project that no one ever heard of, that's completely disconnected to everything you're doing, but now it means you don't get to own it. And it's also useful doing that before concretely deciding on names and branding and that kind of thing, because it might be that the perfect thing you need it just doesn't exist, and so it becomes a danger.